What would be a practical approach for developing your shadow? Well, that's a good one. Let's do a little review of Jungian psychology. The first thing is, if you want to know about this, the proper source is Carl Jung's Collected Works, Volume 9, and there's two parts to Volume 9, A and B, published as separate texts. And Volume 9 is called Archetypes of the Collective Unconscious, and the other one is called Ion. But in Archetypes of the Collective Unconscious, there's a good discussion of the persona and the shadow. And the persona, you could say, is a good way of thinking about it. You know, you watch all those rom-coms where there's always kind of a beta male guy who's being real friendly and always failing miserably with the women because basically he's lying to himself and to them. He's a persona, and a persona is the face that you show to the world when you're trying to pretend and to convince yourself and others that you're, I would say, harmless, but we could say a good person. But a good person isn't harmless. A good person is capable of, well, maybe a good person is capable of anything, but is willing to hold that in abeyance. I read this interesting commentary a little while ago on a statement by Christ in the New Testament, and the statement generally interpreted is that the meek shall inherit the earth. But I was looking up the multiple translations of the word meek, and meek is actually derived from a Greek word, of course, because the Bible, at least some of the original forms of the Bible, were in Greek. And that word didn't exactly mean meek. It meant something like those who have weapons and the ability to use them, but determined to keep them sheathed, will inherit the world. And that means that people who are capable of force, let's say, but decide not to use it, are in the proper moral position. And Nietzsche commented on that a fair bit too. You know, he thought of most morality as cowardice, not because morality itself was cowardice, but because most people who are cowards disguise their cowardice as morality, and they claim that their harmlessness, which is actually a consequence of their fear and inability to be harmful, say, or to be dangerous, is actually a sign of their moral integrity. And that's a really bad idea. So, you know, if you're an axe murderer but you don't have an axe, that doesn't mean that you're moral. So that's the persona. And the persona is the mask that you wear, and that's what persona means, is the mask that you wear to convince yourself and the world that you're not a terrible monster, so that when you look at yourself in the mirror, you don't have to run away screaming. You know, and you might think, well, that's a bit of an overstatement, but Jung was very interested in phenomena such as, say, the psychological phenomena that would characterize the actions of someone who might be an Auschwitz camp guard, for example. And you know, that's a pretty monstrous form of behavior. And the thing about Auschwitz camp guards is that there's no reason to assume, really, that they were much different than normal people. Now, there would have been exceptions, obviously, and what that means is that perhaps you too could be an Auschwitz camp guard, and perhaps you would even derive some enjoyment out of it, and you might think not, but you shouldn't think not so quickly. And what that also implies is that if you could see what that meant when you looked in the mirror and looked at yourself, you might run away screaming, because you'd have a revelation of just exactly what the human being is capable of. And that's a very unpleasant revelation, and also one of the things that stops people from being enlightened, because that revelation of the evil of the self is part of the journey to enlightenment, and an early part.